Welcome everyone! In this video, we are going to be diving into my ultimate tier list for the Great League Season 16 edition. Now, the Great League, we're not currently in it, but we had a nice taste of it, and that is enough time to get this out to prepare you all for the next cycle of Great League. Let you know what to prioritize with your builds, or what's basically most effective in the meta this season. So this is a tier list, so in case you're unaware of how these things work, we are basically ranking each of these Pokemon in terms of effectiveness in the meta. S tier, the best of the best, top Great League meta. A, slightly below that, and so on and so forth, right on down to F. So I'm excited. I always enjoy doing these. Let's hop right into it. So first up, we've got Abomasnow. Abomasnow, very much underutilized, and with so many ground types in the meta now, Diggersby, Gliscor come to mind, should be used a lot more than it is, and very strong. It's going to be B tier for sure. And I do hope to see more usage of it because it addresses Azumarill as well. Abomasnow could also go up to the A tier, but we're gonna keep it on the B tier for now because it's very good in the meta, underutilized but not perfect. And Altaria, oh my goodness, has seen better days. They nerfed the pacing on Altaria. It was once A tier. Last list, it was A tier. It kind of floats between B and C. I will give it the respect of B tier because it's not as bad as on, I would say, a Pokemon like Noctowl, the Sky Attack nerf. We'll give it the respect of B tier, but I really do want to put it on the C tier. That pacing nerf, not good for Altaria and definitely unnecessary, but we're going to move on to Araquanid. My goodness, the stats are very much there on this Pokemon, but they really handicap this thing out of the gate with the moves. This is D tier for now. I would like to see this thing get some love next season, perhaps. Has all the potential in the world with the stats, but the moveset is not helping it out whatsoever. It can learn Lunge for sure. I would love to see that. I do believe it can learn Crunch as well, so it's a few charge moves away. They need to give that thing to the Golisopod treatment and look out. Aurorus, also much like Abomasnow, maybe even more so, very effective in the meta, particularly for Gligar. But the typing in the Great League just kind of falls a little flat. It is still D/C tier in my opinion. The Metachams and Regis are just too prevalent, as well as Azumarill. Much more of an Ultra League Pokemon. So it is D tier in the Great League. Azumarill, speaking of, is now S tier 1000%. Holy smokes. Azumarill back on the map, better than it has ever been. The reason why is because obviously Metachamp still very strong in the meta, but it also addresses Gliscor in the meta. It addresses Diggersby. This thing is quite good, although Lantern is still lurking. But Azumarill, S tier this season for sure. And lest we forget, the monster known as Steelix, Azumarill shuts all of those down. This thing, it is an Azumarill meta yet again in the Great League. Holy smokes, S tier for Azu. And Bastiodon, still solid B tier. For all intents and purposes, the bulkiest Pokemon in the meta, obviously Chansey and Blissey are bulkier, but as far as functional Pokemon, it is the bulkiest Pokemon in the meta, and is definitely has a place. Shuts down Carbink like you wouldn't believe. Shuts down A9 and Fairies. Basti just does what Basti does. That is win hard on where it should and lose hard where it should. A very strong Pokemon, B tier for sure. Beedrill, a benefactor of the X-Scissor update, but it does not help Beedrill, unfortunately, because X-Scissor is a great update for this thing, but the stats aren't quite there. Has excellent coverage with the Community Day move of Drill Run, but X-Scissor still, it's close enough in energy to Drill Run to where it's not quite a bait move anymore. and makes this Pokemon quite binary in terms of how you would use it. But yeah, definitely I would save this thing for the specialty cups. Same goes for Buzzwole, but I'm not going to go as hard on it. It is D tier. It can do well up against psychic types with Lunge. Of course, it has play up against the steel types as well. Buzzwole, definitely not the first fighter I would choose, or bug type for that matter. But yeah, it's got some solid play, but not top tier by any means. And Charizard, speaking of top tier, still very good. It floats between A and B tier. Man, with Azu coming to prominence, I'm going to go ahead and say B tier. It could easily be A tier, though, as well. Still very good. Yeah, B tier for sure. And that brings us to Chestnut. My goodness, man. Chestnut needs a low kick buff. Holy smokes, guys. Let's make this thing the Virizion of the Great League. I say let's do that. Let's buff low kick. I proposed what I would do with it. I would make low kick a poison jab clone, and that would put a lot of Pokemon on the map. Chestnut at the very top of that list, but still very strong nonetheless. Solid C tier. And the same goes for Cofagrigus. Again, this thing needs a bait move. I went over that. I would like to see a Nightshade buff. I wanted to make that, if I can recall. Holy smokes, what did I want to do with Nightshade? Because this Pokemon, along with a lot of others, can learn it. But I wanted to... Oh, that's right. I wanted to make it 60 damage and 40 energy. A nice mid sort of ghost-type bait move. I think Cofagrigus would really benefit from having a bait move. But for now, because it does not, it is C tier. And we've got Cresselia is A tier in the Great League. Addresses Azumarill, addresses Medicham quite effectively. You have to keep it far and away from the strong steel types like Registeel, but my goodness, this thing very much underutilized, and I hope a lot more people were able to get access to it because it is very strong in the meta. Solid A tier. Same goes for Deoxys as well, right up there with Cresselia as one of the top 2 psychic types in the entire meta. Medicham notwithstanding, of course, but I think we all see Medicham kind of as a fighter more than anything. But yeah, Deoxys, still very good. It addresses Azumarill, breaks up the Azumarill A/core about as well as anything. So yeah, very strong Pokemon. A tier for sure. And the same goes, I would almost put Dugong at S tier. My goodness. Oh man, it floats between S and A tier. Oh man. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say S tier. The reason why is because the rise of Gliscor. Dugong addresses that quite well, addresses all of the ground types quite well, and the bulk cannot be denied on this thing. It now has the coverage, easily one of my favorite Pokemon, and very much deserving of the S tier. It is solid as solid as it gets, especially as a safe swap. And then we've got Diggersby. Diggersby back on the map, kind of floats between A and B tier. I'm going to give it the respect of A tier. I would still like to see this thing get either Body Slam or Rock Slide. I think it truly needs that. If it gets what I think it needs, this thing is S tier 1000%. Holy smokes. But that just goes to show, even being limited in that way, it is still very much on the map with the Scorching Sands buff this season. And then we've got Dragonair. Dragonair, sort of B tier, A tier. It's still very good. It's fallen off a little bit. Not really sure why. Perhaps the concerns for Carbank and then the Registeel and Bastiodon answers for Carbank. So that, I think, has deterred a little bit of the usage down from last season, but still very strong and has a place in the meta on the B tier. And the same goes for Double. Double has high utility. Floats between B and C. I will give it the respect of B tier for sure. Very strong normal type, quite spammy, has high utility in the Great League. And Frostlass, very strong, again, because of Gliscor. In seasons past, I wouldn't have dreamed of putting it on the B tier, but it is right there. breaks up Medicham and Gliscor about as well as anything. Very strong. Definitely deserving of the B tier. And we've got Galvantula. This is a C tier Pokemon. It is quite squishy. It has some niche play in the Open Great League. I don't see too many places for it. Perhaps if we begin to see a lot more Cresselia in the meta, I think Galvantula will see some more usage. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of water. But it does address Azu as well. You can just go with better Pokemon to address those two in the Great League. And then we've got Gliscor. Gliscor floats between B and C tier. I will give it the respect of B tier, but I really do want to put it on the C tier. Obviously not nearly as good as its pre-evolution Gligar, but still decent, especially if you want to have a Gligar, Gliscor backline. That's really the only usage I could see for it if you wanted to do that sort of dynamic, but otherwise you just go with Gligar 100%. And then we've got Golbat. Golbat floats between B and C tier. They're just better flyers. I'm going to say C tier, but it could easily be B tier as well. Very strong, has respectable bulk, but they're just better flyers, i.e. Gligar. If I'm going to go with a flyer this day, and I would even go with a Charizard over perhaps Golbat. But yeah, it could be B tier as well, but I will stick with C. And Guzzlord is D tier, unfortunately. Could be C tier as well. Dragons have seen better days in the meta, unfortunately, with Carbink and Azu, of course, Azumarill. Guzzlord, much better suited for the Ultra League, at least for now. And then we've got Jumpluff. Jumpluff is very interesting. It addresses Azumarill. There are just far too many steel types in the meta. I'm going to go ahead and give it the respect of C tier. Very strong grass type, has an amazing community day move in acrobatics. It's just missing that steel coverage, which I would agree that not every Pokemon needs to be able to have that sort of dynamic where you can counteract your weaknesses, but I do think it is very much suited for Go Battle League. So for that reason, it's on the C tier. Whimsicott's sort of in that same category, although it's not on this list. I sort of put those two in the same category, although they have different typings. And we've got Como-O. Como-O is a D tier dragon / fighting type. Unfortunately, it's just not a dragon meta, guys. If you're going to use a dragon type, you're best off just going with Dragonair, 100%. Maybe even Dragonite, but more so Dragonair. I think that is now the premier dragon. Altaria is not far behind, unfortunately. And of course, there are better fighters as well. Lantern, still S tier. Holy smokes. Not really much of a nerf, much more of a rebalance, a tweaking of how you play Lantern, but it is still very much strong in the meta. Shuts down Azu, does quite well up against Dugong, although Dugong can fight back. And it's now able to much more easily farm down flyers and leave certain matchups with loaded energy. And of course, you can still fight back up against the strong ground types with that Surf charge move. So S tier, Lantern, still here. Just a little different. Lantern just seems angrier this season. I don't know. That extra damage from those sparks just makes me view Lantern as angry this season, but this thing is still very good. And Lickitung, S tier. Holy smokes, we nerfed Noctowl, and look how it has catapulted Licky back onto the map. This thing about as good as it gets. Easily the best safe swap in the meta right now. Very strong. What more can I say? Lickitung, the best normal type, arguably ever in the Great League. Very strong Pokemon. S tier, 1000%. And we've got Lurantis, floats between D and F tier. I'm just going to say F. What I don't like is the bulk. isn't quite there. Has amazing charge moves. It's just the meta is still very hostile to grass types, which I really did not want to see this season. I wanted to see grass types be more effective in the meta, but unfortunately they aren't. We just didn't get the changes that I think would have cultivated a better meta for the grass types. And Lurantis, one that suffers from that, unfortunately. Shadow Machamp, yeah, it's a D slash, I'm going to say F tier. If you're going to go with a fighter, you're going with Metachamp. I would even go with Scrafty over this thing. It just doesn't have the stats or the it has the coverage, but they're just better fighters, guys. But Mandibuzz, A tier now with the Aerial Ace buff. This thing, very good now. It addresses Licky Tongue quite well. Has some play up against Metachamp, although Metachamp still can put in work up against Mandibuzz, but very strong A-tier Pokemon now with the slight buff that we received to Aerial Ace. I will be sipping water as my throat is quite dry today for some reason, so don't mind me. But yeah, Mandibuzz A-tier for sure. Very strong, very much improved. And Mantine, B/C tier. Oh man, I will give it the respect of B tier. Again, much like with Mandibuzz, the the Aerial Ace buff was quite nice for this Pokemon. It's just the existence of Lantern kind of deters a lot of people from it, but it has the bulk, a very strong flyer for sure. Alolan Marowak is F tier. Holy smokes, this thing has the stats, has the typing, does not have the moves, unfortunately. Yes, it does have its legacy Shadow Bone, which is the only thing keeping it in the minds of anyone, to be honest. This thing needs a better second charge move. There are a number of routes they could go with this thing. Has access to Hex. I would take a closer look. Perhaps I will do a video on how we can improve certain Pokemon, and I would probably put AWAC at the top of that list, but it is suffering in the move department for sure. It is F tier. Metachamp, yeah, there's no question about it. Medi is still Medi. It was slightly nerfed. Almost unnoticeable, which I really do appreciate, because I never ever want to see strong Pokemon be made completely irrelevant. I just think that's very lazy. There are better answers than making Pokemon completely irrelevant. I think that's the lazy route to go to try and quote unquote balance out a meta. It drives me crazy, and I know most of you know that. But yeah, Metachamp, S tier for sure, still very much on the map. And then we've got Meganium. Meganium, unfortunately, can go C tier. I was almost going to put that on the D tier, but I'll give it the respect of C tier. With the death of Noctowl, yeah, this thing can see some increased play. Has strong neutral play up against Gligar. Can beat Licky Tongue, I believe, and of course it shuts down Lantern. Very bulky Pokemon, very much underutilized. I think a lot of people should catch on that this thing should be used more often than not. And then we've got Shadow A9, still the best Charmer in the meta. Very, very solid Powder Snow user as well. Very, very strong A tier Pokemon for sure. But can't quite say the same for its Kanto counterpart. My goodness, it did get a buff with Scorching Sands, and I had a lot of fun when I used it. I will give it the respect of C tier. Right behind Charizard, I would say, as far as the best fire type you would possibly want to use, but definitely bulkier than Charizard, and yeah, it's very solid, very, very solid Pokemon. And then, oh man, we make our way to Noctowl. Holy smokes! Oh man, Noctowl, it's gonna be between B and C tier. Oh man, I'll give it the respect of B tier. It was once S tier, 100 and 1000%, but my goodness, nerfing that pacing, very unnecessary. They went so hard on Noctowl. Oh, that was so short-sighted. I do hope that they come around and realize the error of their ways. But for now, it is certainly much less effective than it once was. I will give it the respect of B tier, but I really do want to put that thing on the C tier. That was horrible what they did to that thing. Obstagoon is a C tier normal type. It has a very distinct place in this meta, and that is to shut down this guy right here. Holy smokes. I don't know if people are going to catch on or not this season, but Obstagoon, if you're seeing a lot of licky tongues, you might want to consider building around Obstagoon. Of course, it gets handicapped by Pokemon like Azumarill and Medicham, but if you want to shut down a licky tongue, Obstagoon is your guy, my goodness. Has play up against Mandibuzz as well, but yeah, Medi and the neutral matchups do hold Obstagoon back, of course. And then we've got Pelipper. Pelipper, very strong. I would almost want to say an A tier. I'm going to go ahead and say A tier because it can address Gligar quite well. Another Pokemon that breaks up Gligar and Medicham. But the existence of Lantern, I think, makes a lot of people nervous, as well as Dugong lurking and Azu, but still a very strong flyer. Arguably right behind Gligar in terms of the best flyer now in the meta. And speaking of flyers, Pidgeot, still C, well, no, I'm going to go ahead and say C tier. I would still go with Noctowl over Pidgeot in this meta. Holy smokes, at least Noctowl can hit steel types, my goodness. But this thing does have Aerial Ace, but I haven't seen anyone use Aerial Ace on this thing thus far. So we'll see. It just... the moves, it doesn't have the coverage right now, unfortunately. And Politoed. Man, yeah, that's a D tier Pokemon. It's just, it falls flat on its neutral matchups. And again, the meta's quite hostile to something like this. We've got Azu, we've got Lantern. Again, the neutral matchups like with Medi, DD shuts it down. Forget about it. Yeah. If I'm going to go with something like this, I'm just going to go with Swampert, to be honest with you guys. And then we've got Politoed. That's a little bit different. This one's a little bit different. It's a C tier fighter. Very good Pokemon. It's just, I think Medi is just far too much more of an enticing pick, I think, than Poliwrath right now. And again, Lantern's still lurking. Azu. You've got flyers like Gligar still in the meta, although Poliwrath has the coverage to fight back. And we've got Registeel, very strong, S-tier Pokemon for sure. I don't think that anyone would argue with that. Very strong, serves a solid purpose, shuts down Azu, has strong neutral play up against Lantern, beats Licky, shuts down Cresselia. Yeah, Reggie, about as S-tier as it gets, for sure. And then we've got Runerigus. That's a D-tier Pokemon. Much like Cofagrigus, needs a good bait move. It has Sand Tomb, but Sand Tomb is not a good bait move, unfortunately. And the typing, having that ground typing, I think often hurts it more often than not, unfortunately. But yeah, just there are better ghost types. Speaking of ghost types, Sableye, A-tier, 100%. Very strong. It's just with the rise of Azu that has curtailed the Sableye usage quite a bit, but Sableye still very strong in the meta. There are a few better answers to Medicham. Yeah, Licky Tongue as well have made Sableye usage drop a little bit in the rise of Mandibuzz, but there are a few better answers to shut down a Medicham than a good Sableye. And then we've got Scrafty, very interesting Pokemon. It's solid C/B tier, but I'm going to go ahead and say C tier. Medicham, still everywhere. Azu, again, it's an Azumarill meta, my friends. Any meta dominated by Azumarill and Medicham, there are going to be very few dark types that can thrive in that sort of meta. So still strong C tier for sure. Skarmory, holy smokes. You want to talk about killing a Pokemon? It was already almost there, but my goodness, unnecessarily nerfing Sky Attack just totally shut down any hopes of anyone considering Skarmory. My goodness, it is F tier, which is kind of crazy to say because there was once a time when Skarmory was top tier meta. Unfortunate. And then we've got Steelix. Very strong. Very strong. I'm not putting it on S tier. It's not there. It is an A tier steel type. Just Azu, Medi lurking. Yeah. Reggie. Yeah. Very good on the right team. It is strong. Very strong. Not quite S tier. And the same goes for G-Fist. Still very good. I'll give it the respect of A tier, but I almost want to put that thing on the D tier. Again, a Pokemon that already didn't hit particularly hard. Another unnecessary nerf there on EQ. Not only did that unnecessary Earthquake nerf hurt Stunfisk, it had adverse effects on other Pokemon that really relied on Earthquake like Walrein. But still has the stats. I'll give it the respect of A tier. Swampert, same goes for Swampert. Man. I almost want to say S tier on Swampert. Oh, let me see. My goodness. Yeah. I'm going to say A tier. It's still very strong. It has a purpose. Shuts down Reggie, but Licky, Azu, and Medi dominate this meta. Lantern to an extent as well. A Swampert is A tier for sure. And then we've got Tapu Fini. If you're just you're going to think about Tapu Fini, you might as well go Azu for sure. But still interesting Pokemon. It is certainly much more of an Ultra League Pokemon. D tier for Tapu Fini. And we've got this guy here, Toxapex. Very strong C tier poison type. Arguably the best poison type in the meta, very much underutilized. I would still like to see this thing get some love in the water coverage department. I think that would encourage the much needed usage that we need to see, but inclusions of strong ground types into the meta are very much holding this thing back. Now more than ever, we've got Diggersby, my goodness, Gligar, Gliscor. But otherwise, a very strong Pokemon that really should be used more. And Toxicroak, C tier fighter. I'm just using Medi. Plain and simple, I would even go Deoxys over something like a Toxicroak. Trevenant, C tier as well. They need to release Trevenant. Give that thing its 5 cycle back, and you would be surprised at what you see. It would knock Azu down. It would knock Lantern down. It would knock Medicham down. It would knock Reggie Steel down. But it just needs that 5 cycle to be able to have any chance up against these strong ice types as well in the meta. But yeah, unfortunate for that thing. And then we've got Tropius. That's an F tier grass/flyer. Needs a better fast move, and it I guess it did get the love for the charge moves. Always has had Leaf Blade, which is one of the best charge moves in the game. It needs a better fast move to become much more meta relevant. And then we've got Umbreon. Umbreon is an A tier dark type. I would almost still use Umbreon over Mandibuzz, but still, yeah, very strong. There's still the neutral matchup king, 100%. But I think Licky might have something to say about that, but very strong dark type in the meta. Speaking of Licky, Umbreon, one of the best answers to a Licky tongue you can find. And then we've got Venusaur here. It's probably behind Abomasnow for the best grass type. I'm going to go ahead and say... yeah, I'll go ahead and say B tier because it beats Licky, has strong play up against Medi, beats Azu, beats Lantern. Very strong Pokemon, just not as bulky as you would like in the Great League. And then we've got Vigoroth. Unfortunate, Vigoroth is ranked very high, but I think it's much more of a sim hero than that ranking would suggest. Man, I'll go ahead and say C tier. I'll give it the respect of C tier. Walrein is now D tier. Unfortunately, And Whiscash, also D tier. I would still like to see this thing get Rock Slide. You give that thing Rock Slide, and look out, guys. Holy smokes, it will shoot right up. Driftblim is F tier. There are just better fighters and ghost types. Haxorus is F tier, much more of a specialty cup Pokemon and not an open Great League Pokemon whatsoever. Jellicent is very strong, C tier. It addresses Medicham quite well, addresses Altaria, Deoxys. It's just the rise of Mandibuzz. Even something like a Diggersby can put in work up against the Jellicent. So yeah, solid C tier for that. Same goes for Nidoqueen. I would still like to see that thing get Shadow Claw. I've proposed that a number of times in the past. Quagsire, Shadow Quagsire, strong B tier / A tier. Very, very strong ground type. I would almost venture to say that I would be tempted to use that over Swampert these days. This thing is amazing. Has a community day coming up soon as well. And then we've got A-Slash. That is an S tier Steel / Ice type. Very strong. Has strong play up against Reggie. Can't do much against Licky, which is surprising because it does have that Steel type advantage. But Licky is just double resisting that fast move pressure. And even resisted damage adds up. That just shows how much of a monster Licky is. But it has play up against Lantern. Has strong play up against Azu as well. And addresses Gligar as well very well, which is why it is S tier. Ariados is F tier for very obvious reasons. Credeli, man, I would almost say C tier for this guy here. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say C tier for Credeli because Rock Slide was a massive improvement. Still haven't quite seen the usage on it. I think it's needs the Steel coverage to truly catapult it up, and then you would see that usage rise quite a bit. Dragonite, kind of C tier, very squishy Pokemon. I think if you had your choice, you would still just go with Dragonair. Same goes, I would almost use Altaria over this thing. It's quite squishy. And then we've got the Core Breaker Extraordinaire. Holy smokes, Dunsparce. Very strong B tier Core Breaker in this meta. Gligar has deterred the usage quite a bit, but still very strong Core Breaker, still very strong. And then we've got Golisopod, excuse me. Golisopod, very strong. I'm going to go ahead and say C / B tier. Could easily be in the B tier. It's just Pokemon like Carbink, Basti, the strong Steel types in the meta, with the exception of A / can put in work up against it. But a very strong anti-meta Pokemon can put in work up against the Psychic types like Deoxys and Cresselia. Yeah, solid C / B tier. Same goes for Clefable. Very strong Pokemon, very much improved. And then we've got Drapion. Oh man, it's D tier. Unfortunately, the buffed ground types really are not good for Drapion in the Great League. Let's just say. Same goes for Unova Stunfisk. Carbink is S tier, 1000%. Almost as bulky as Bastiodon, not quite there. But a very strong Pokemon. You can run the recommended Rock Throw, which it is slightly more effective with Rock Throw, but a very strong case to be made for running Tackle on it as well. Gives it much more flexibility, although and it actually generates energy faster than Rock Throw, but Rock Throw with Stab still slightly more effective on it. But again, Tackle might just be the way to go. It gives it that flexibility that it really needs. And speaking of S tier and flexibility, holy smokes, Gligar on the map with the dig buff and Aerial Ace buff worked wonders for this thing here. Easily one of my favorite Pokemon to run now in the Great League. Breaks up Medi and Reggie about as well as anyone could hope. And as a top tier flyer / ground type, the best in both of those categories to be exact. And then we've got Greedent, very strong, very much improved. B/A tier. I will go ahead and say B tier. I'm not going to go too crazy on Greedent. Very strong, very much improved. About as spammy as a Pokemon gets. And then we've got Serperior, very strong grass type. Arguably the best grass type now. I almost want to put this thing in the A tier. In fact, I am, because it beats many of the top Pokemon that we see up here, guys. Dominates Azu. Very strong against Dugong. Beats Licky, I believe, in even shields. Dominates Lantern, of course. Has play up against Medi. Very strong up against Medi. Very strong up against Carbink. Arguably the best grass type in the meta, for sure. For sure. Serperior, very strong now. Very much improved. And then we've got Skuntank, still a C tier Pokemon. Still not great. Again, the ground types are everywhere. That's a C tier. And then Tentacruel, the same kind of applies there. I'll keep it on the C tier. I almost wanted to put it on B tier, but a lot of these Pokemon up here give Tentacruel a hard time. And Shadow Vic, I'm gonna almost say, let me see here. I almost want to say B tier for Shadow Vic. I will go ahead and give it the respect of B tier. Very squishy Pokemon, has to be on the right team to be at its most effective. But that about wraps it up, guys. That is my tier list for most of the Great League. These are how I would rank them in terms of effectiveness in the current meta. Hopefully help you guys with your team building and prioritization of what to build and what to run as the season progresses. Very interesting meta this season. It has shifted quite a bit, and I will admit I've been having a bit of fun thus far. But guys, I had a blast. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, I thank you for watching, and keep up the grind. Thank you, guys.